part 2 of solving quadratic equations. Okay, so what we have is a quadratic equation identified by the power that's the squared, right? So if the highest power is squared, one variable, it's a quadratic equation. That's what we got here, and we're solving these by factoring. So first step, remember, we want to set to 0. Step 1, set to 0, okay, which I already have, so that's taken care of. And then next I look for the GCF. I always want to do that first. We're really, step 2 is just a factor, but I just want to make sure you're getting the GCF first, and then do all your other factoring methods. Okay, and then the final step is to set each factor to 0, okay, and solve. Factor to 0. Okay, so let's follow those steps. I already set to 0. This one does have a GCF. There's a 2. In both of those, I can factor out a 2, so I do that. I get x squared minus 16 equals 0. I'm not done factoring yet because I recognize that's the difference of squares. So I factor it as such. And now I do step 4, what I'm calling step 4, set each factor to 0. Now I got to be careful. I got the product of 3 things here, right? 3 things. 1, 2, 3. And I want to figure out the solution to the equation by using the 0 product principle, right? But first I have to understand that this part can't be 0, right? If there was an x here, I could set 2x equal to 0, but I can't set 2 to 0. It doesn't make sense. 2 cannot be 0. So this constant term out here is not going to affect my solution. I will only set each factor to 0 if there's an x term in it. Okay, so we could clarify that statement, set each factor with an x term or with a variable in it to 0 and then solve. And in this case I have 2 easy solutions. I add 4 to both sides, I get plus 4, and this one you'll see is negative 4. Okay, so what's new about that one is this factor. That is a factor, it is 2, but it doesn't have a variable, so it's not going to affect my solutions. Only these 2 guys will give me 2 solutions. Alright, let's work that process for the remaining examples I have here. Number 2, set to 0 and solve. Okay, so something we see in this one, we don't like that first term to be negative, right? Because I have to factor, and I don't like factoring if the first term's negative. So I can do an easy algebraic trick to make that first term positive. There's a couple things I can do. What I like to do is multiply both sides of the equation by negative 1. I'm allowed to do that, right? If I do something to one side, that's fine as long as I do it to the other. So what happens when I multiply something by negative 1? It essentially changes the sign of everything. So the negative x squared becomes positive, the 8x becomes negative, and the negative 15 becomes positive. What happens over here? Well, 0 times negative 1, still 0. Okay? So now I have it how I want it. I have it set to 0, and now I'm going to look for the GCF. This one does not have a GCF, nothing there in common, but we recognize it as a trinomial. So what I do, I factor it as a trinomial. 2 numbers that multiply together to give me 15 and add together to give me negative 8. Shouldn't be too hard to figure out. Negative 5 and negative 3. Okay? Again, those aren't the answers. Be careful. Sometimes I'll have students tell me that those are the answers. Negative 5, negative 3. No, not true, because we're not done yet. Those are the 2 values that allow me to factor, but the next step, of course, as we've been doing, is to set each factor to 0 to get our solution. Add 3, I get a solution of positive 3. Add 5, I get a solution of positive 5. Number 3, that's not set to 0, so I have to set it to 0. So I'm going to subtract the x over. You can do it one step at a time if you want. Minus x from both sides. X squared minus x equals 20. How did I get that? Well, I can't subtract x from x squared, right? Because right here I can't subtract x from x squared. Those aren't like terms. So I just write it, x squared minus x. Next thing, subtract the 20. And now I have x squared minus x minus 20 equals 0. Okay, and I had to do a little work, but I've set it to 0. Now it kind of looks like the last one, right? Find the GCF. What's the GCF there? There is none. Alright, so move on to your other methods of factoring. This is like the last one. Trinomial. Two numbers that multiply together to give me negative 20. Add together to give me negative 1. After a little bit of searching, should be, oh, I got an error there, right? That's not right. If I add those two together, I get positive 1. So I got my signs mixed up. I can see it's 5 and 4, but you got to think about the signs. If I want to add to get negative 1 and multiply to get negative 20, it's got to be negative 5, positive 4. Okay, remember with factoring, if you have trouble finding those, what I like to do is just list all my factors of 20. Okay, I list my factors of 20. I say, how am I going to get that negative 1? It's negative 20, so that means I have to multiply a positive by a negative. If I look at all my factors of 20, there shouldn't be too many, right? 1, 2, 4 goes into it. Once I get here, I say, well, wait a minute. That pair will probably give me negative 1, right? And it will if I make the 5 negative. And that's how I got negative 5 and positive 4. That's the factoring piece, so we're not done. The next step, of course, is to set each factor to 0 and solve. Sorry, I'm getting a little sloppy here. Negative 4 is one solution. Plus 5, positive 5 is my other solution. Do the check there if you want. I'm not going to take the time in the video, but plug a 5 in here. You'll see it works pretty easily. 5 squared equals 5 plus 20. That one should work. Plug in the negative 4, should work as well. Alright, one more to go. So what do you think? Why don't you try this one? Pause the video, give it a try, see what you get. First thing you got to do is set it to 0. So that's what I'm going to try and do. I'm going to add 4x. You got to put it in the right spot. You can't add 4x to either of those terms because it's not like. So I've achieved my first step. I set to 0. Now I factor. No GCF. So this one factors like the previous two. Two numbers that multiply together to give me negative 45, add together to give me 4. If you have trouble with that, list all your factors of 45. 45 and 1. What goes 2 doesn't go in, 3 goes in. 3 times 15. I'm not going to get a 4 out of that. What's next? I think 5 times 9. And once I get there, I say, well, wait a minute. If the 45 is negative, I think I can get to positive 4 if I pick that pair, right? Positive 9 and negative 5 will add together to give me 4 and multiply together to give me negative 45. So I set each to 0 and I get x equals 5, and of course I get my final solution of negative 9. Okay, so remember the steps. Set to 0, we had to do that a lot in this video. Then factor, but always look for your GCF first. Then your other factoring methods, difference of squares. In this case we did a lot of the trinomials. And then once you have it factored, the last thing to do is set each factor to 0 and solve.